Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. And we're going to look at this document Dwight sent me yesterday. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this morning, for all your blessings, and for the fellowship that we can have as we open your word together. We invite your Holy Spirit to speak to us, to teach us, to guide us, to give us strength and wisdom in dealing with the situations that we encounter each day. And so we ask for your presence today in the study and throughout this day. Be with each person, help them and guide them. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so obviously we've still been dealing with this Charlie Kirk assassination. And then Dwight put together this document, which he's going to have to explain to us, of you got James White, James Abram Garfield, and Charlie James Kirk, all with the days they died, though James White isn't assassinated, but he's going to be connected, his death close to the assassination of Garfield, right? So that's the idea there.
It's part of it, yep.
Okay, so can you kind of explain what you see in what you put together in this document?
Okay. First off, the most obvious point is that all three shared the name James.
Yeah.
Now,
James
James,
is the middle name of Charles, but Charles
right.
Kirk's is James. You know, my middle name's James. My first son, or not my fourth son, James, is named James. But yeah, which actually is just a variation of the name Jacob, believe it or not.
Right.
Just getting transliterated, from Hebrew into Greek, into Latin, into English, I think is the pathway.
It's quite a path.
Yeah.
Now, James White, of course, died more from overwork than anything else.
Yeah.
And he had, there was quite a bit that he had done in the early years, but noting that his death occurred 7 years prior to the 1888 General Conference session.
Mm-hmm.
To say that his death was 7 years prior to when Christ wanted to pour out the Holy Spirit
Mm-hmm.
is a bit revealing. Now, as a minister of the Adventist Church, he had also been an expositor of the Millerite message.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fair to say that he was a public speaker.
Mm-hmm. Well, he did lots of public speaking, yeah.
Okay. He was not an official of the government. He was married to Ellen White, and his influence was seen as being akin to Moses to the Advent people and the Advent movement.
Mm-hmm. Now, generally, I find that Adventists don't really know much about James White. I mean, they know who he is, but just his life and his work is generally not known. We don't really talk about him too much.
Right.
Would you agree with that? Yeah.
But in this case, I think it's important for us to note this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, James Abram Garfield, where James White was from, I believe, the state of Maine. James Garfield was from Ohio. He served as a major general in the Union Army, and this is while he was elected and serving as a member of the House of Representatives. So he was quite involved with government.
Mm-hmm.
He was the 20th president of the United States. Now, as a teenager, I have been on the property of James Garfield. Now, Garfield was a very interesting person because his mind was exceedingly brilliant. This is the president that could write Greek with one hand and Latin with the other simultaneously.
Mhm.
He was the only sitting member of the House of Representatives elected as president. There have been multiple senators, there have been others, but he is the only House member. So if AOC was to run for president in 2028 and was able to be elected, she would then be the second. Now, Garfield was examining the Catholic faith. He'd been raised Protestant. He very easily could have been America's first Catholic president had he lived.
Okay.
Now,
So what do you mean he was examining the Catholic faith? So what was he doing specifically? Just scholarly work?
he was quite the scholar. There's actually a proof for the Pythagorean theorem that he addressed that many mathematicians they shake their head at how simple it really is. He was examining his faith to determine whether he was going to continue as a Protestant or whether he was going to become Catholic.
Okay.
Had he been had he survived and had he continued with this, he, like I say, could have been the first American Catholic president.
Yeah. Now so he was Protestant, but what denomination?
Kind of an offshoot. I can't really say that he was like a Methodist or Presbyterian.
Okay.
Now, he was shot on the 2nd of July of 1881. He dies September 19th of 1881. And mostly he died.
19, so September 19th, 1881. That's 100 years before my son Matt is born.
Okay.
He's born September 19th, 1991.
Well, in this situation, the reason for his death was not because he was shot. It was because of the unsanitary practices that many of the doctors used at that time. In fact,
Infection then.
correct. The man that shot him claimed that it was the doctors that caused his death rather than him being shot. That was his defense.
That would be a pretty poor defense, though, because it doesn't matter if the care was bad, because if he hadn't been shot, he wouldn't have to go to the doctor's care.
Now,
Legally, that would be a pretty bad defense anyway.
they seem to think that the man that shot him was either severely narcissistic or could have been syphilitic.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting that he died 2 months and 17 days after being shot.
Yeah.
Also, he was the second president assassinated.
Yeah. Of course, the first being Abraham Lincoln.
Correct. So at this point, America has had 4 presidents assassinated: Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy. So 3 of those being Republican, 1 being Democrat, but quite honestly, Kennedy today would have been considered a Republican, not a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had 4 that have died in office from various maladies. Now, Charlie Kirk, as we're well aware, this is a man that was not connected as a government official, but he was yet very much involved as a public speaker and as one that was integral in Trump's second election. Now, the reason I was led to put this together was the comment that Charlie Kirk's wife had been raised as a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And there are comments in the public record that Charlie Kirk had been examining the Catholic faith, and had he lived, he could have come out as a Catholic.
But it's very, very unlikely.
I'm going off of what he himself said.
I'm going off what he himself said too.
Okay.
So he has a lot of problems with Catholicism.
Okay.
So I mean, he examined Catholicism, his examination, and I looked at recent things where he talks about it. He's not very impressed.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm finding that these three men, all connected with the name of James,
Mm-hmm.
having their demise in some ways interrelated. I mean, James White interrelated with Garfield, Garfield interrelated with Charlie Kirk, made interesting points.
Okay.
Now, the fact that Garfield's death from the time that he was shot took place 2 months and 17 days after he was shot, and again 7 years prior to the 1888 General Conference session, was also intriguing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely James White. I mean, he's dying in between that period when Garfield is shot and dies.
Yeah.
So that's going to be what, 30?
It's 35 days.
Yeah, 35 days, but then before he dies. So you did 35 days from when he died, and then you got another 40, what is that, 45 days? August 6th to September 19th. So that's 31 to the 6th. And then you add, okay, so you'd add 13.
34 days.
44 days.
All right, you're correct.
Yeah, or 40, yeah, 44 days. Okay, 35 and 44, so 79 days. Okay, yeah, so, I mean, obviously James White died on August 6th, which is the date we have for Hiroshima. It's also my mom's birthday. Okay, so it's just a bit more information to sort of put there in our memory banks to think about these things. There might be more about that. Okay, so let's go back to here because we're studying Second Samuel now. Okay, so there's some news. Okay, so there's some important news story about a shooting. Well, not anything about it right now. But yeah, so we have a lot of crazy things going on in the world at the present time. Now, yesterday we looked at this story, just the first part of Second Samuel chapter 1, of course, is David hearing about Saul's death. And so we addressed some of the symbols in there, particularly all the digits of July 18, 2020 in three different words. We have it in the word obeisance, head. What was the other one?
The ground?
No, ground is earth. That's 776. Where is it here? Anybody remember the other one? The crown that was upon his head and the bracelet was on his arm. Okay, I don't anybody remember what the other one was? Yeah, we had the bowed, that's obeisance, and head in that sentence. And then we had, leaned, that's right, when he leaned upon his spear. Okay, so we have these three different words that have those same digits, same four digits. All right, so Saul leaned upon his spear. And then we're going to have that in connection with the chariots and the horsemen. So we have all of these symbols: Gilboa, spear, leaned, the chariots and the horsemen. So the idea is that we have this person who comes to David to deceive him, to draw honor to himself, or to draw himself into David's favor, but it's a deception. So we don't know what that's referring to yet in our time. Now, we did connect a bunch of these symbols with December 25th, 2021. So one of the things that we're suggesting is that this is all referring to that period of time. The time that we're in is this third day, right? So there's going to be 2 days, right? And then the third day. So he had abode 2 days in Ziklag. And it came to pass on the third day that, behold, there came a man over the camp. So it's in this period of time, but the references are, that is, this person is bringing these symbols, and his story attaches to the past aspect of the movement. So with the end of FFA, its final end, however we would mark that, there are still going to be those who are holding on to some aspects of the message, or at least pretend to, but really are not doing it for the right reason. So is that what we get from the story?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So that's a little bit problematic in the sense, we have either a warning about something that's going to happen, or something that is happening.
Regarding the book of James, all these people that having James in their name, James spoke about classism. He spoke against it, and he spoke about self-examination and self-control.
Yeah, you're in the book of James.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I just got my wheels turning here in my head. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So we have 2 days mentioned there. So if you add 8147 plus 3117, so those are just the Hebrew numbers for 2 days. If we count that from November 9th, 1989, it's 11,264 days. 11,260. Yeah. So if we count from November 9th, 89, we come to September 11th, 2020. So now we've had September 11th, 2020 in our lines. We also had September 11th, 2023 and September 11th, 2025. Now, of course, that's 19 years after September 11th, 2001, right? So 19 years is a symbol. Does that make sense? So we have November 9th. So basically it's 19 years plus the 4325, right? 4324, pardon me. So if you take away 4324, you get 6940. 6940 is the number of days in a Metonic cycle in 19 years, right? So it's 19 years plus the 4324, the number of days between November 9th and September 11th. So obviously 2020. So is that significant as dealing with these 2 days? What are the 2 days then represent symbolically? And they're going to be 2 days in Ziklag. Now Ziklag 6860 is it's 80 days less than a Metonic cycle, than 19 years. 6940 is a Metonic cycle, 6860 is 80. I don't know if that's significant, but we got the 2 days. So how could we represent those 2 days? Could the 2 days represent
Tarrying?
Well, yeah, a type of tarrying, but could it represent the period from, because we had talked about, well, the 2 days being, November 9th, 2019 and July 18. But could we kind of zoom out a little bit and say that the 2 days mark November 9th, 1989 and 9/11, 2001? Because don't we already understand that 1989, that is November 9th, 1989, is connected to November 9th, 2019, and that 9/11 is also connected, so that we're just tying these symbols together, these 2 days, with this September 11th symbol. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So there's something going on here. Now also he abode 2 days in Ziklag. So David abode 2 days in Ziklag. Now the abode, of course, has the 34:27, and we know that's just if we drew the week of Christ from right to left, as the Jews would draw it, then we would have 27 to 34 AD, right, for the week of Christ. So it's tied to the week of Christ symbol in this context, right? Every time you see the word abode, because it's a common word, doesn't mean, you would interpret it as the week of Christ. But here we can. And then we also have the slaughter, right? The slaughter being 5221, backwards is 1225. So it symbolizes December 25th, which could be December 25th, 1991 or December 25th, 2021, right? So when it came to pass on the third day, we now have this man coming out of the camp from Saul with his clothes rent and earth upon his head, right? So he has this symbol. Well, one is you got earth, which is backwards 721, symbol for midnight, and then 7218. So that's the digits of July 18, 2020. But more than that, when he came to David, he fell to the earth, which is a different word for earth, right? It's not the one that refers to dirt, but to the land, and that's 776, the number of days from November 9th, 89 to December 25th, 1991, and he's going to do obeisance. So again, we have the digits of July 18, 2020, and 7812 for the Hebrew number. And then we're going to get that same digits for the word leaned, which is a different word completely, but different order. And then David questions him. So if we have this story, so if we have this story, but if we have this as something in our history, can we put it into the past or is it in the future? Like, is there any way we can put it into the past? Because if we're going to say it has to do with our history, but is it the past history or future history, if that makes sense? Any thoughts on that? Nobody has any thoughts about it? Because we're saying we're in the third day since December 25th, 2021.
And the third day being the day that David has heard of what's happened to Saul.
Yeah.
Why do you think it took so long for the news to go such a short distance?
Well, first, we don't know exactly when Saul died, even in connection with David being in Ziklag here, right? So this is just, so after the death of Saul, it says, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites. So David isn't returning because he knows Saul is dead or that Saul had died at that time, right? It's just that David's going to be 2 days in Ziklag. And then the third day that he's there, a man comes out of the camp from Saul. Now, this guy has his clothes torn, he's got dirt on his head. So how long has it been since Saul has died? Is he, he doesn't say when Saul died, and how far away is this from where David is? So Ziklag is where David is. Where did Saul die? In Gilboa, right? So how far from Gilboa to Ziklag? Anybody?
Well, I'm looking.
Okay, it's 187.2 kilometers, according to just to search Google Maps. Now, of course, that would be a drive.
It'd be about 2.5 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours and 49 minutes, it says here, by the Yitzhak Rabin Highway. Yitzhak Rabin, if people remember him, he's the guy with the eye patch, right? Was that Yitzhak?
No, that was.
Who was the guy with the eye patch?
Meyer or whatever.
Okay. Anyway, Yitzhak. So Yitzhak Rabin, which one is he?
He's one of the later presidents of Israel.
Okay, later. Okay.
It's interesting that the Yitzhak Rabin Highway is Route 6.
Okay. So yeah, so pretty interesting, 187.2 kilometers, which is
mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's shorter ways. Um, but it's a fair distance to go from Mount Gilboa to Ziklag. So I would think that Saul, it wouldn't be 3 days journey. I mean, if he, I mean, I can do like 35 kilometers a day, 40 kilometers. So when I'm in good shape, right? But you wouldn't normally do that like day after day. Uh, so you would be looking at how long a journey? A week at least?
Balboa in Judah? I think it's in Judah, right?
No, isn't it Manasseh?
Or Simon? Oh,
Because it's up near the Sea of Galilee. It's because you got the Dead Sea and then you have the Jordan River going
well,
between them. It's going to be up from the north part of the Jordan River.
okay. Then Ziklag is in Judah. Looks like.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you got, I mean, so 187.2 kilometers. Wow. There's probably a shorter route, but it's not a straight line because when you travel, you gotta take a route. You would probably go down the Jordan and then across, I would think. But still, so
Well,
if
you
it
mean,
was like a week, it would be like 27 kilometers a day. So let's say 25 kilometers a day. That's still a lot of kilometers. So it could have been more than a week even from when Saul dies and how long Saul was dead until the guy found him. Right. So you can see sometimes the problems in the way the stories are told. They're not really giving us all the time elements involved. Because if you read it, you might just think, oh, he just came, like 3 days. There's no way that it was 3 days after Saul died, right?
well, I'm looking at a different representation, but it's still saying that this from Gilboa to Ziklag could be walked in about 44 hours.
Okay, so if you're going to go 44 hours, let's say I'm going to go 6 kilometers an hour. Okay, so yeah, it could definitely be walked in 44 hours. But that's basically 2 days straight.
I get it. I'm just giving the
Yeah, I mean,
representation.
yeah, but nobody's going to do that. So, I mean,
Unless they're really high on meth or something like that. Oh, it's true.
okay, yeah. So you got anyway. It's not going to be 3 days since Saul died. Is all I'm trying to say, right? So the 3 days is just the 3 days that David is in Ziklag, right? So Saul has died before that.
In this situation as well, Ziklag, the current city where Ziklag had been, sits opposite of Ashkelon, one of the 5 cities of the Philistines.
Yeah, though it belongs to Judah.
Right.
Now, if we add the third day, so just as we added the 2 days together, to get 2 days, we got 11,264. If we add the third day, 7,992 plus 3,117, we get 11,109. So 11,109 days just has the digits of 11, 9, and 9, 11. Just there's 3 ones and 1 9, and a 0. So it also could be conceived of as 11, 10, 9, like a countdown. And we have 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? So I don't know. So 11, 10, 9 represented that way. If we count it from November 9th, 1989, it brings us to April 9th, 2020, which is March 27th, 2020. So it has that symbol. And it's also interestingly, I'll just show you this. I'll just make sure I did this all right as well. So if we go November 9th, 1989, and you go 11 and 9, it brings you to this date. So this date, Nisan 15, beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it's April 9th, which is March 27th. And the mine date is 776. So you get that
Wow.
number of days from November 9th, 1989 to December 25th, 2021. So I kind of think that as a symbol, it just ties us to these different symbols. It's all. So March 27th, Nisan 15, and the 776. So no, there's lots of symbols here, but this story, the way that I'm taking it, is that it's referring to something future in the movement. So either this is a warning for us to tell us about like false brethren or something like that. I'm not sure what it would
Warning to
represent.
examine our hearts continually.
Yeah, well, and we know people can use some of the truth, but it doesn't do the work that it's supposed to do, right? So people can profess to believe something, but not practice it. So it could be a warning in that sense. But David's not deceived by, well, he might be deceived. He might not know that the story's, a fabrication, but the person himself is not going to live, so it doesn't benefit him. Now, let me see here. We got, so we need to look at these notes. So I'm going to share this here once I get it downloaded. Okay, so let's look at what Ellen White says about this story. So there's just some Spirit of Prophecy comments here, which might be really relevant, might bring out some things we don't notice. So, of course, we've just read these verses. Second day, 2 days, the third day, and this man comes out of the camp of Israel. So I saw some in Zion that were languishing. They were dormant and unbelieving. I asked the angel of Zion should languish. Said the angel, she is rising, never to fall again. God has stretched out his hand the second time to recover the remnant of his people. Now, this is a manuscript 5 from 1850. So we know that this comment about stretching out his hand the second time is part of Early Writings, page 74, which was originally published in November of 1850 in Present Truth periodical, which became the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. And it's going to be that vision that Ellen White had on October 23rd, 1850, though it's a mistake was made and it was written as September 23rd, 1850 in the Early Writings and in the original publication, right? So we've gone through that. So we have this God stretching out his hand the second time to recover the remnant of his people. So it's connected to that vision. I saw some that meet together at the conferences at Oswego and vicinity were not right. They do not partake of the spirit of the lovely Jesus. They have not vital godliness. And unless they soon partake of the spirit of Jesus and have their hearts sanctified by the truth they profess to believe, they will be purged out of the camp of Israel. I saw there needed to be a searching of heart among them. Said the angel, thou art upon the enchanted ground. Dost thou not see it? Awake and arise and put on the strength of the Lord. The powers of darkness are rising. Art thou rising? Is it not getting the victory over thee? I was pointed back to the children of Israel in Egypt. I saw when God worked through Moses before Pharaoh. The magicians came up and said they could do the same, that they could work the same miracles. I saw the same work was going on now on the earth that the magicians carried on anciently. I saw the signs and mighty wonders of the devil have increased within a few months tenfold, and it will still be on the increase and spread. And unless Israel is constantly rising and is growing in grace and in the knowledge of the truth, the powers of darkness will get the victory over them. I saw that we must be daily rising and keeping the ascendancy above the powers of darkness. I saw singing to the glory of God often drove the enemy away, and shouting would beat him back and give us the victory. I saw there was too little glorifying God, too little childlike simplicity among the remnant. I asked the angel why there was not more faith and power in Israel. Said he, "Ye let go of the arm of God too quick. Press your petitions to the throne and hold on by living faith. Believe ye receive the things ye ask for, and ye shall have them." I was then pointed to Elijah. He was subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly. His faith endured the trial. 7 times he prayed before the Lord, and at last the cloud was seen. I saw we had doubted and wounded Jesus by our unbelief. God's people are rising, said the angel, never to fall again. Be careful, said the angel, lest the branches be cut off, and others are raised up in their stead. I saw some would bear fruit and work to the glory of God. I saw we must keep close to Jesus and fast and pray if we could not get the victory over the power of darkness. I then saw Brother Gorsling, that he had wounded and torn the hearts of God's people. I saw he had been stubborn and rebellious, and unless he changed his course entirely, the church should disfellowship him, for he has been a dead weight to the church. Said the angel, Jesus' work is almost finished in the sanctuary. It is no time to be stupid now. A quick work will the Lord do upon the earth. The 4 angels will soon let loose the 4 winds. Said the angel, beware how thou treadest enchantment all around thee, east and west, north and south. If Satan can get thee to slumber now, he is sure of his prey. I saw some in Israel had been half starved for food, and when the present truth was presented to them, they ate it with thankfulness and gratitude, like half-starved children. Said the angel, can ye stand in the battle in the day of the Lord? Ye need to be washed and live in newness of life. Then I saw those whose hands were now engaged in making up the breach, and are standing in the gaps that have formally, since 1844, broken the commandments of God, and have so far followed the Pope as to keep the first day instead of the 7th, would have to go down into the water and be baptized in the faith of the shut door and the keeping of the commandments of God, and in the faith of Jesus coming to sit on the throne of his father David and to redeem Israel. I also saw those who have been baptized as a door into the professed churches will have to be baptized out of that door again and into the faith mentioned above. And all who have not been baptized since 44 will have to be baptized before Jesus comes. And some will not gain progress now until that duty is done, and then they must live anew unto God and serve him faithfully. So there's a lot here. So what is it that we mainly see that we can apply? So what is this about? Okay, so we have some that are not representing Christ. They do not partake of the spirit of the lovely Jesus. So what would that be referring to?
Those whose lives are not in accord with what they claim to believe.
Okay. Now, they may be, doing some of the things that we believe. They may, be Orthodox, Adventist-wise in their thinking. They may say they believe the truth. So they might not be doing things that, generally we would consider like open sin. Maybe some are, some aren't. But they don't have a vital godliness. And so they don't have the spirit of Jesus. So is she talking here more abstractly or more practically? Like, is she talking about how they are acting, or just, they don't have the spirit of Jesus, just overcome habits or something? Because we know it's connected to having their hearts sanctified by the truth, right? What they profess to believe in. So people can profess to believe in the truth, but not have the spirit of Christ. That is, they wouldn't have the character of Christ in how they deal with one another, their attitude. They may think that they're protecting the truth, but they could be argumentative. They could be a bad representation to their neighbors, not friendly, all these types of different things that it could be. She's not giving us the details of what this means, what their actions are. So I don't think it's just, but even though she doesn't do that, I don't think it's just, they don't like talking about partaking of the Spirit of Jesus. Because if they profess to believe the truth, then maybe sharing it with others even. What is she implying? And she says they will be purged out of the camp, and that they need to search their hearts. So what's the problem here? What's this enchanted ground that they're walking on?
Thinking they're all right, that they're holy when they're not. Like it's a
Right.
message to the Laodiceans.
Yeah, that is the enchanted ground from everything that I've seen in the Spirit of Prophecy. When she uses that term, she's talking about that enchantment, because there is an enchantment where we don't see our spiritual need. We think that we're all right, and it's the worst condition to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's usually manifest in attitudes about others. Now, and sometimes not as overtly as we would think. So, because we can always think of sort of the worst examples of people, who are full of themselves and really condemnatory of others. But some can do it in a much more subtle way, right? They can be the people who at prayer meeting, they bring up all these different people that need to be prayed for. But the reason they bring them up is it's just gossip, right? We know those types of people. So they're going to bring up their concerns when people aren't there, out of, a sort of a feigned caring for that person, when in reality it's just they despise that other person, or they're jealous of that other person, or whatever. So this is a problem. And when I think about this is 1850. But if you read 5 Testimonies, we can see that what she's talking about here, it with some becomes almost general within Adventism. That is, we have Adventists who have a profession of the truth. They'll talk about the Sabbath, the law of God. They know some of the doctrines, and they'll, share those. But really, what it means to be a Christian isn't seen in their lives. They may think it is, because they have a superficial understanding of what it means to be a Christian. But yeah, it's just they're not manifesting Christ's Spirit in how they look at others. So this could have something to do with how we're understanding this passage, as far as this person who comes and says that he killed Saul. So this sort of deception, I think that could apply. Okay, so we went through these verses. David said unto him, how went the matter? Right. The people are fled from the battle, and many of the people are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead also. The man said, okay, so they're just going to give us a thing from 1 Samuel where they have a question. Okay, so it's just a scriptural reference. Came out of the army, I fled today out of the camp, and he said, what is there done, my son? So similar situation. Doesn't mean they're parallel, but they could be, right, if we put them on lines. David said unto the young man that told him, how knowest thou that Saul and Jonathan his son be dead? And the young man that told him said, as I happened by chance upon Mount Gilboa, behold, Saul leaned upon his spear, and lo, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. Now, we don't really know this Amalekite guy who comes and tells the story. We don't really know the true story of how this guy got the bracelet and the crown, or what his perspective is, right? So we don't have all of the details. We know what happened. We know that Saul killed himself because his armor bearer wouldn't. And then we have this person telling a fake story about Saul, that he killed him. So, I mean, did he happen by chance? What does that mean? So I mean, I think he probably happened by chance to find Saul's body, but he definitely did not come to Saul before Saul died, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then when we look at these symbols, Gilboa being 1533, leaned upon his spear, right? That having to do with, right? So leaned 8172, right? So we have leaned upon his spear. So we have that symbol of July 18, 2020. The chariots and the horsemen remind us of Daniel 11, verse 40. So this person is saying the right things in a sense, right?
Right.
Right. He knows the truth. He knows the message, but he's being deceptive about his true position. And he doesn't kill Saul, so that's just a story. So he's deceiving David. He's a false brethren. So he professes to believe in Daniel 11 verse 40 to 45. He understands some of the things about this message. So his story is obviously not true, but what it exactly is, what exactly happens, how he ends up in that situation, we don't know. So it says, Saul looked behind him, called unto me. He says, I'm here. And asked, I'm an Amalekite. And he said again, stand, I pray thee, upon me and slay me, for anguish has come upon me, because my life is yet whole in me. So he says that he talked to Saul, but he doesn't, right? He didn't talk to Saul. So that this just didn't happen, but we still have this story. So how do we take a story that hasn't, that is a story, that is a lie, that hasn't happened? Can we take that story and still does it have the characteristics of a lie? Do you understand what I'm asking? Even though it's not a true story, it's a deception. How do we take that as far as can we make an application of it? Or is it just a complete deception? Do you get what I mean?
Well, it wasn't a complete deception, because he didn't totally persuade David that he was there at the death of Saul.
Right. Yeah. But but that part is he is trying to deceive David.
Yeah, right? He didn't get the credit that he wanted from David.
Yeah, so he's looking for credit. But the thing is, we have a story that's not true. Like, we can't take this man's story and say, well, this is what happened, because we know it's not what happened. But does it still illustrate something, the story itself, just on its own? Or do we just take the story as false and say it doesn't illustrate anything? You understand what I'm asking about that, and how we look at a story in the Bible?
Well, the verse that comes to me is that which is highly esteemed among men is abomination in the sight of God. So not everything that we, as carnal human beings, would look at as good is actually good. Like slaying Saul was supposed to be, a great thing, but not in the eyes of God.
Yeah. So we know that the story is not true, but can it still be an illustration?
Well, it has to be, or it wouldn't be in the Bible.
Okay, so you're saying that even a false story, it's a lie that somebody tells in the Bible, we can still take that and make an application of it as if the story is true, right? You understand what I'm saying? That's because I'm trying to ask if we can do that. Can we take this story? Because we could just say the story is a deception, and so there's nothing in the story that we can't take any of those details and look upon them symbolically.
Yeah,
right?
we try to see what the intention and the motivation is, instead of looking at the action, which may seem praiseworthy on the surface.
Yeah, and so still, I don't know how to ask the question, but we could say, well, this story is illustrating for us a deception that's going to try to come upon us, right? That there's going to be false brethren and there's going to be people who represent the truth. And so we could just take the story that way. But the story itself has symbols in it. Are those symbols deceptive because they're in a deceptive story, or do they belie something that the person telling the story is not attending, but that God can show us through that story?
I think so.
Okay. So, yeah, I definitely think that we can do that. And we have even stories which are ironic, such as the story of Samson, mm-hmm. that even though Samson in some ways represents a lack of trust in God and immorality and so forth, but as a biblical story, it illustrates the gospel. So, and a lot of other things, connected to the gospel. So, because Samson becomes a type of Christ. Well, that's pretty crazy when you think about his life. So when he's saying that he was leaning upon his spear, for instance, we don't know if that happened at any time in this situation with Saul. But we can still take those symbols, right? And were the chariots and horsemen following after him, right? Obviously, we know he was at Mount Gilboa because we know that's part of the story. Now, what about Saul looking behind him? What is that illustrating?
Looking to see where he had been led, looking to see where God has led us.
Okay, so here we have this person who's an Amalekite. He's telling this story to David. The story is not true, but it has these symbols that we can attach to this message. And even the idea of looking behind him. One of the things we know is that as we pass through prophetic events, they reflect back upon past events, right? So that's kind of looking behind. So even here in this story, he's illustrating Saul as going to the old past, looking at the old past, looking at the light from the past. But again, all of this is a pretense, right? This didn't happen, but yet it illustrates something that will happen, or even it's in its deception, right? But we could say, and he looks behind him and he sees this Amalekite and he calls, to the guy, hey there, and then the guy says, here I am, okay? And he's going to be asked a question, who art thou? Well, what is this question, who art thou?
God is seeking us. God wants us to come forth and proclaim for him.
Okay, so we can...
Could he be asking what kind of message it is?
Could be.
Like when God asked Isaiah, who will go for me? And he replied, here I am, Lord.
Yeah, so the idea here is, we got Saul asking this question, who art thou? Says he's an Amalekite. And then he says Saul asked to be killed by him. And he says he's going to do it. Right?
Is that kind of like Jeff saying, I have failed, and I'm a leper without the camp? So slay me in a sense?
I don't know. That's what I'm really trying to understand, how we would apply this. Because this has to do with the death of Saul. We're saying the leadership of Saul. So there's going to be a guy who claims that he's killed Saul, but he hasn't. And he's going to claim that Saul had the correct message in, as far as the symbols are concerned here, right? It's going to have all the symbols of this message. Now this guy's going to take this crown that was upon his head and the bracelet that was on his arm and bring them to David, right? Now he doesn't do that, obviously this crown and this bracelet must be Saul's, or showing them to David wouldn't really mean too much unless he, just got some other crown and some other bracelet. I'm pretty sure it'd be something that David would identify as being Saul's. So the person must have come upon Saul's body and been part of the group. The question is, how did he end up getting the crown and the bracelet? You would think that, we just don't know this guy's actual story, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know, right? As far as I can tell, anything that we've read at this point hasn't shown us what the true story is. We know the true story of what happened when Saul died. This guy's not mentioned in the true story. He comes to David with this story. He has the crown and the bracelet. I would assume they're actually the crown and the bracelet of Saul. David sees them, knows that Saul is dead. But again, we don't know how he came across these things.
For all we know, he robbed somebody that first took those things.
Yeah, right. So we don't know. We just have this man's story. And the Bible's not going to tell us what his actual story is. Now, David's going to ask him these questions about whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger, an Amalekite. So he says he already was an Amalekite because he said Saul asked him who he was, and he said he was an Amalekite to Saul. So David's going to ask him now, where do you come from? I'm the son of a stranger, an Amalekite. So he already told David that, at least the way that the story is told. And then David said unto him, how wast thou not, afraid to stretch forth thine hand again, a hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Now, why would he ask that question to an Amalekite?
Yeah.
Because he might just say, well, an Amalekite doesn't care about Saul, but he says, you were afraid. Now, let me see here. So it's just going to bring us back to the story in 1 Samuel 31. I'm just looking at these references. So about killing the Lord's anointed. Okay, well, so David called the young man, said, go near, fall on him. He smote him that he died. Right, smote again is going to be that 5221 Hebrew number. David said unto him, thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth has testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. Okay, so Ellen White says it was the third day since David and his warriors returned to Ziklag. As they labored to restore their ruined homes, they watched with anxious hearts for tidings of the battle, which they knew must have been fought between Israel and the Philistines. Suddenly a messenger entered the town, with his clothes rent and the earth upon his head. He was at once brought to David, before whom he bowed with reverence, expressing recognition of him as a powerful prince, whose favor he desired. David eagerly inquired how the battle had gone. The fugitive reported Saul's defeat and death, and the death of Jonathan. But he went beyond a simple statement of facts, evidently supposing that David must cherish enmity toward his relentless persecutor. The stranger hoped to secure honor to him as the slayer of the king. With an air of boasting, the man went on to relate that during the battle, he found the monarch of Israel wounded and sore pressed by his foes, and that at his own request the messenger had slain him. The crown from his head and the golden bracelets from his arm he had brought to David. He confidently expected that these tidings would be hailed with joy, and that a rich reward would be his for the part that he had acted. But David took hold on his clothes and rent them, and likewise all the men that were with him, and they mourned and wept and fasted until even for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for those of the house of Israel, because they were fallen by the sword. The first shock of the fearful tidings past, David's thoughts returned to the stranger herald, and the crime of which, according to his own statement, he was guilty. The chief demanded of the young man, whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger and an Amalekite. And David said unto him, how wast thou not afraid to stretch forth thine hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Twice David had had Saul in his power, but when urged to slay him, he had refused to lift his hand against him who had been consecrated by the command of God to rule Israel. Yet the Amalekite feared not to boast that he had slain the king of Israel. He had accused himself of a crime worthy of death, and the penalty was inflicted at once. David said, thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. David's grief at the death of Saul was sincere and deep, evincing the generosity of a noble nature. He did not exult in the fall of his enemy. The obstacle that had barred his access to the throne of Israel was removed, but at this he did not rejoice. Death had obliterated the remembrance of Saul's distrust and cruelty, and now nothing in his history was thought of but that which was noble and kingly. The name of Saul was linked with that of Jonathan, whose friendship had been so true and so unselfish. The song in which David gave utterance to the feelings of his heart became a treasure to his nation and to the people of God in all subsequent ages. Okay, so we looked at David's lament for Saul and Jonathan. So is there anything in there that Ellen White adds that helps us?
Well, perhaps when we see the church totally ruined, we can think of this passage in Samuel,
Okay.
and we can see that Jeff has gone off the rails. How are the mighty fallen?
Yeah.
Well, what does that say about us?
Yeah, really. Beware.
Mm-hmm.
That verse in Peter about beware of falling from our own steadfastness. Because it can happen in a moment. We're not watchful.
Yeah. So she doesn't really say anything that differs from what we've chosen. We to interpret this passage of this person's deception. So she doesn't say anything different that I can see.
Yeah, Proverbs warns us too about gloating when our enemy falls or fails.
Mm-hmm.
God will deal with us accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we got David's lament for Saul and Jonathan. David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. Right, and we went through this yesterday. Also, he bade them teach the children of Judah. Bow, right, the use of is added. Behold, it is written in the book of the upright. So the book of Jasher may not be a proper name. Yeah, and it was just in the comments there in the chat where pleasure derived from someone from another person's misfortune, Schadenfreude, which in German they have to have a word for it.
Pronounced Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude.
Freud?
Freud, yes. Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
Basically also describes today's professional sports.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's why I've never been, I always hate when people win because then somebody lost, and I always feel bad for the person that lost. I know it's pretty tough for me.
Well, these professional sports are so brutal. So
Yeah.
self-exalting. I can't stand them, and all the money that's involved, and the sex trafficking, a whole lot of connections there. I stay
Sex
clear of them.
trafficking in sports? What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, it's famous for that. The Olympics. Yeah, there's been lots of
Really?
exposés about that.
Really? I never heard of that. Okay.
Oh, I have. I've been to the conventions and listened to. I spoke at one of them actually.
Okay. Anyway, the point is the Germans have to have a word for it. We don't have a word for it in English. We have to say taking pleasure, or we get pleasure derived from another person's misfortune. Anyway, yeah. So David, of course, here his lament for Saul and Jonathan. So as Ellen White says, he's not thinking about all of the bad things about Saul. Now we can see, with the death of Charlie Kirk, people who were celebrating his death or, thinking that he deserved to die. And that's the spirit of the world.
Mm-hmm. Hyenas.
Yeah, it's just that, as a Christian, we don't delight in the death of the wicked.
Yeah, and Jeremiah, I think it says, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked.
Yeah.
Let's return from their sin and repent.
Yeah, but especially when people are cheering on the death of the righteous.
No, that's Satanism.
Yeah, well, it's cruel. It's very unchristlike. So we can see that this lamentation of David, it shows that he's a man after God's own heart, right? One is David would not, kill Saul, trusting in God. Now, David, had some frailties, some mistakes that he made, times that he didn't fully trust in God. But that's part of his learning process.
And ours.
You look at this Charlie Kirk thing, and you pray for the family, but you also pray for the one that shot him because he's going to die, and he needs Jesus before he dies.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kelly notes that gloating could sort of be that type of applied in that way.
Mhm.
But anyway, it's just something that we wouldn't do as Christians. So the beauty of Israel is slain upon thy high places. How are the mighty fallen? And then we tell it not in Gath, publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. So we definitely see a parallel with what has happened in that aspect of it. Obviously, I'm not paralleling Charlie Kirk with Saul, but we're just that idea of people rejoicing over the death of an enemy, right? And definitely, we don't want our enemies to rejoice. Ye mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for there the shield of the mighty is vilely cast away. Shield of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. So again, a lot of these words are added in the Hebrew, or added in the translation that aren't in the Hebrew. So it doesn't say, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain. It could just be, there was no dew nor rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty is gladly cast away. The shield of Saul was not anointed with oil. Now, as though he had not been anointed with oil. So however we look at this illustration, now the mountains of Gilboa we tie to the symbols of 1533. And then we have the symbols of the former and latter rain.
Mhm.
So there is a work was supposed to be accomplished by this movement that was not accomplished.
Right.
Right? That's the idea. And that's what David is mourning. What could have been more than what was, which I think is appropriate in situations like that. That we can mourn the loss of a supposed enemy, someone who sought our harm. One is we actually care about them, right? It's not like where and I kind of liked just because we only got a couple of minutes, but at the memorial you're going to have Erica Kirk forgiving the assassin. But I actually liked what Trump said. I thought it was because Trump is often very self-deprecating, which is generally not something that somebody who is a psychopath does.
For sure.
Yeah, and so he presents himself as basically a bad man. I hate my enemies, right? Now he's also being humorous. So the left doesn't really fully understand Trump's sense of humor. They always take him completely literally. But Trump, in some ways, is being quite honest about his own character, even though he's in some ways making light of it. He recognized his inability to forgive. He's not exalting himself as some great religious person who has all this forgiveness. And he also, said, well, maybe Erica can, help me see that I'm wrong, right? Which I thought was really quite interesting, Trump's response to that. Now, but I've seen other people who've interpreted it completely differently. They shut off his teleprompter at his UN speech. So he was going to speak at the UN, and
That's a recent thing. That's a recent thing. I think it was yesterday or day before, and he was getting a little long-winded, and he was browbeating the UN, telling them that they're destroying their own countries with open borders, etc., funding illegal immigrants to come into the U.S. And he was going on quite long, and then they shut off his teleprompter.
Wow,
and so then then he went on even longer, and and then there was they also, when he was about to get on the escalator, it stopped.
turned it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said a good thing that Melania's in good shape. She had to walk up. Again, I think that was kind of a self-deprecating reference to himself not being as in good a shape as her or something. Anyway, but yeah, it is kind of interesting, just this sort of the characters are being manifest in people. I guess is people can't hide their true selves in the time of crisis. Their true characters. Anyway, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful, Lord, once again for the time that we have had to study. So we just ask for your continued presence throughout this day. Help us in all that we do. Ask for strength, for clear minds, for wisdom, and help us to trust fully in you. May your angels watch over us and our families, our loved ones, and be with us in our interactions with others. So bring us together again to study is our prayer in Jesus' name.